Hi everyone, today I'm joined with Shayne, who is going to be talking and giving me a little bit of advice, hopefully you some advice, about the difference between money and currency. So Shayne, please lead us off, because I don't know where to start. All I know is I like money, I need money, that's all. So please give me some more.
Okay, well, let me start off by asking you a question, Kevin. In your wallet, you have a few bills there. Yeah. Like, for example, I see a 10,000 yen bill there.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Is that money or is that currency?
Okay, so in my just normal reaction, I would say this is money.
Right. Yeah, most people will say that. Yeah, exactly. But actually, it's currency.
So what would be the difference? I mean, isn't money currency though?
People use the word money to describe what actually is currency, but money in my idea of money basically is things like silver, gold,
Okay.
yeah, or something that's gold backed or silver backed.
Right. So, I mean, we're going before we had paper money, before anything like that? Is that what you're trying to say?
Kind of, yeah. So, for example, the reason why that yen in your wallet there is currency is because it's created by a government, in this case, the Bank of Japan.
Mhm.
And most currencies are called fiat currencies, which means they're not really backed by anything. Most people, for example, before 1973, the US dollar is backed by gold. It's convertible with gold.
Mhm.
But after that, right now, it's just what we call fiat currency, which means the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the US, can create as much US dollars, as they want without having any gold backing or any kind of backing.
Interesting. So maybe that you could say that's kind of why not only America, but a lot of countries are what we say in the hole. Because we could keep printing money, right? But what does that mean? It makes me think, like, what's the point of it if it's just paper and we can keep printing it? Is there any value really? Or is it only the value that we're putting on it?
Okay. So, are you familiar with the game Monopoly?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I have turned that game over many times. I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah. So basically, the money in Monopoly money,
Mhm.
is not different than the US dollar, for example.
Oh, so
The fundamentals are the
Right.
same, basically.
right, because we believe it's currency,
Right.
it becomes currency.
So what gives the US dollar value is faith and trust of the people who hold it. Faith and trust meaning they have faith and trust that they could take their dollar and go to the store and exchange it for goods and services.
Right.
But once that faith and trust disappears, then no one will want to hold the dollar.
And have we seen this before in history?
Many times in history. Actually, there's no fiat currency that survived more than a few hundred years.
Oh,
The average is, I think, 90.
90
The
years?
US dollar is about 120 years old right now. So
Oh, really? So in the past, we've seen this, like you said, many times. The average was 90 years?
average is 90.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
Wow. So again, let me go back to the idea of what we place as value is currency. Right? So, and again, it's because of the trust that we have in the people or the government, whoever's providing this faith that this $1 equals $1 for this.
Right.
So what might lead to this collapse, this impending collapse that we might see?
So, during the pandemic, the Federal Reserve, I think they expanded the money supply by trillions of dollars. So basically, they, and another way to say this is they printed trillions of dollars worth in currency.
Yeah.
Just out of the blue.
So they said, "Oh, we can pay everybody $1,000."
Yeah, well, like, for example, basically what they did was they had the stimulus package.
Right.
So that money was basically printed out of the blue, just created.
Right. Just out of thin air.
Out of thin air, exactly. Yeah.
And what about Japan? Did Japan do the same thing?
Japan has been doing something called yield curve control, which is basically, in a simplistic way to explain it, is endless money printing to keep the yield of their government bonds below 0.25%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how, this in my theory, this sounds great. Like, let's just keep printing it and keep giving it to us, and that's wonderful. How is this going to end up, catching us?
Okay, well, eventually, at least in the US, where the Fed, the way they expand the money supplies, they sell treasury bonds. And once they sell X amount of bonds, that's the amount of money they create, basically. But there's always, a buyer of those T-bills or bonds. If there's no buyers, then, the currency will collapse basically.
Wow. Yeah. And do you think we're kind of starting to see
we're heading that way right now? Yeah.
So what would be some things that we might want to look out for, that could kind of give us this idea that this is happening,
most people would probably see it through inflation.
Okay, which we're going through right now.
Exactly. And, the people like Jerome Powell, head of the Fed back in the States, they've been saying, it's just a transitory thing or it's a temporary inflation, but I don't think it's temporary because they've been saying it for the past few years now.
Right, I see.
Right.
Okay. So since we're on this topic, and this is kind of recent news, the Silicon Valley Bank in San Francisco, California, what's going on there? So I'm a little behind on my news.
Yeah, so I just looked into it briefly, but it seemed like they were over-leveraged and they collapsed basically from a traditional bank run. So, which means like most of their depositors went to the bank and just started withdrawing their funds.
Yeah. Well, do we know a reason why so many of these people there's a lot of, I think it was a lot of like tech startup companies that were in this Silicon Valley Bank. So was there a reason that sparked them trying to take out their money all at the same time?
This is what I heard from some analysts on YouTube. This analyst said that he thinks it's because of the exposure. For example, when any bank may be in a similar situation, but if it's not on anyone's radar, then no one has knowledge of what's happening of the bank's financial status.
Right.
So then, if that happens and no one knows about it, then nothing will happen basically. But what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank? It was on the radar basically with the venture capitalists, and then they were looking at their situation. They're over leveraged basically, so that triggered. This is what the analysts thinks is that what triggered the bank run.
Oh, so they could actually see.
Yeah, it's all public record. So.
Oh, so that's why, and then they just pulled out.
Yeah.
Wow. Pretty amazing.
It's crazy.
Sad, but
yeah.
And this is the what ranking is this for the biggest?
It's the second largest bank failure in the U.S.
Wow. Yeah. And it's gone.
It's gone.
Now, I've kind of heard that some investors, Elon Musk's name was in the mix, could possibly buy it out. Is that something that's possible? I don't know if I misread, but I had heard that maybe like a group or someone with enough money could buy it out and then take over that. I'm not sure.
I suppose it's possible, but who would want to, bail out this bank, right?
So, right. Yeah. That's true. Well, I mean, I could see Elon doing it because he tends to spend money randomly and without thinking and holding grudges. But hey, who am I? I don't have 44 billion plus. So.
Right. Janet Yellen mentioned that there's not going to be a bailout of the banks. If the government does a bailout, basically taxpayers will be covering the costs of it.
Ouch.
Yeah. So according to Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, she said that there's not going to be a bailout.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
This is not really connected to the bank, but in a way I'm kind of curious because, again, we're talking money, we're talking currency. I want to look a little bit into cryptocurrency. And then we could even go into talking about FTX with what happened with that.
Right.
Since we just started talking about Silicon Valley Bank. Yeah, that's a wild story about FTX. But what about cryptocurrency? Would you say that is a currency that people should actually look into and take on?
Cryptocurrency is not a fiat currency. Let's take Bitcoin, for example, because it's the first major crypto. It's the grandfather of cryptos, basically. It's not considered a fiat currency because basically of how it's created through proof of work mining.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's a hard cap of 21 million that will be ever produced, and that will be finally mined in I think 2140. So
wow, really?
Yeah.
That's
20 years.
I knew it had a cap, but I didn't know how they could actually see the limit of how far that would go.
Yeah.
But 2140, wow.
2040 is the estimated date.
Interesting. So you've got Bitcoin, don't sell it yet. Just hold on to it maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, historically, Bitcoin has, I think the 10-year average of, not 10-year. Bitcoin has averaged, I think, so many percentage points per year. I can't remember the exact number right now. Yeah.
So it's something that maybe just
long-term wise, yeah. But a lot of people like who I talked about Bitcoin, they say, oh, it's dangerous. And I think their definition of dangerous with Bitcoin is just the volatility of the price.
Right.
Yeah.
It's up and down.
Yeah.
You can't really
Right.
You can't really gauge it too well,
Right.
depending on what's going to happen with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right. So could you also lastly share about CBDCs, please?
Okay,
and
sure.
Kind of tell us what that is and how it's connected.
CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. So basically what it is like, for example, a digital version of the Japanese yen.
So is this kind of like another type of cryptocurrency or like an NFT that we've seen recently?
No, it's not an NFT. It would be basically, from my understanding, a blockchain version of a fiat currency. For example, blockchain version of the Japanese yen.
So it's legit. It's legitimate.
It'll be issued by the central bank. So central bank meaning Bank of Japan or the Federal Reserve.
So would it be the same kind of idea with Bitcoin? Bitcoin has a limit, how much can be created. Would the same be kind of set, like we were talking earlier about how, the US or even Japan's just printing money without thinking about it. Could they put a block on it so there would be value to it, or?
They could, but I don't think they will because it's basically a digital version of an existing currency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the reasons why there are many governments are switching over to this is if a government issues a CBDC, they'll have more control of your spending. For example, they'll have 100% visibility of what you're spending your money on, basically.
Oh, okay. What would be the pros and cons to this? I could see really bad cons.
Right.
What would be pros, cons to this?
Well, from the government perspective, the pros would be more control, meaning less money laundering, things like that. But for everyday people, there's not many pros, basically.
Right. Privacy's one.
Even that, I mean, because it's on the blockchain, everything's visible. So,
there's I'm sorry, I meant there's no privacy.
No privacy.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, in China, they've been experimenting with their CBDCs for the past few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the social credit score system there. So they could say, imagine you're in China. Kevin, you're eating too much of this food. It's not healthy for you. You're going to stop. So you won't be able to purchase
wow.
donuts, for example, anymore.
That would not be good for me.
Or, they could say, oh, you owe the government X amount in taxes. They can just take it out.
Wow. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, you lose your privacy. Like you just said, you lose money or even your basic rights to just purchase something that I wanted to purchase.
And they could say, like, you have to go to this school. If not, sorry, you're out of luck.
Wow, that's terrible.
If you have your own business, they could tell you, like, don't do or don't sell this product. If you do, then we can just cut you off.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. So it doesn't really sound like there's many pros for the normal person.
Not many, yeah.
Do you think that this is the future for a lot of government?
It looks like we're going that way, actually. So It's a little scary.
Yeah, that is scary. Because, I would love to be able just to go to my bank, pull out how much I need. Nobody really knows.
So basically, cash as we know it, dollar bills, Japanese yen, paper money, for example, or coins.
Yeah.
That eventually is going to go away with the introduction of CBDCs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dude. Okay, so like you said, they've already introduced it like into China.
Right.
What about, let's say, Japan or America? Do you see this happening next 10 years, 15 years?
From what I heard, the Bank of Japan is working on their own CBDC.
Really?
Even in the US.
Well, it's going to be interesting, in at least Japan to me, is because, they're still pushing the cashless payment, which is actually, it's interesting, for the longest time, Japan's just paper money, currency, that's it.
Right.
Places wouldn't even accept credit cards.
Right.
Some still don't. But they've really pushed in the past few years, like the cashless payment, even way ahead of like the US.
Yeah.
Like the US was crazy surprised about Apple Pay, which we've been doing for, several years, even just using like Passmo or Suica. So it's kind of interesting to see how it's swinging the other way so quickly.
Right. Well, if you take a look at China, for example, if you go to China today, most vendors don't accept cash anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
You need to pay with, some sort of payment system, like Alipay or something like that.
Wow. So it's swinging very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Then. Interesting.
So I think Japan may have done, or had that campaign for going cashless as a way to kind of,
steer us in
steer us in the right direction and get us used to, paying without cash. When they do introduce their CBDC.
Right.
It won't be such an alien thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk more about that for sure. Any kind of conspiracy talk is, it's not even a conspiracy. It's really happening. But I'd like to wrap it up there. But I would like to have you back on sometime to talk about what's going on in the commerce world, anything that's going on with the news, and especially with this currency situation, because I need to be on the up note to really keep up with what's going on.
Okay,
and, how to convert my money.
I'll be happy to discuss that with you in the future.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to English Roundtable, made possible by Kanda Gaigo Career College in Tokyo, Japan. If you enjoyed hearing natural English conversation, subscribe and like us wherever you're listening, and check us out on YouTube, Twitter, and our other SNS platforms, which will be in the description for this episode. Head over to the YouTube page to see some of the keywords we used in the conversation and other activities to test your English listening skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.